All right. I'm going to go ahead and get started today. So good afternoon. My name is Amanda Jarvis, and I'm with the Virginia SBDC Network. For those of you that are not familiar with our organization, the Virginia Small Business Development Center is a partnership program between the U.S. Small Business Administration, George Mason University, and local host institutions throughout Virginia. With 27 locations across the Commonwealth, we provide training and technical assistance to small businesses in their local communities. Our one-on-one consulting services are available at no charge. Today's webinar, So You Received COVID EIDL Funds, Now What?, is presented by the Virginia SBDC Network. We are recording today's presentation and it will be posted on our website, virginiasbdc.org. You also get a copy of the slides today after the presentation. Due to the large number of participants, everyone's microphone is muted, but if you have questions during the presentation, you can type those into the Q&A box. We have also enabled the live transcript function, which you can show or hide via your meeting controls. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our presenter for today's session, Mike Austin.
Thank you for the introduction on the network. Again, my name is Mike Austin. I'm a retired, or some might say recovering banker. I played banker in Hampton Roads, Virginia, and elsewhere in the state for approximately 37 years. And during that time, I specialized in not only small business lending, but in SBA loan program underwriting. I did that for more than 25 years, and I worked throughout Virginia and also in the Mid-Atlantic. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about myself. The most important thing is to talk about if you receive the COVID EIDL loan, what do you do? How do you document how you spent the money? How long do you keep the documentation? Other subjects such as subordination will be covered. Also, some factoids, if you will, about the program. So go to the next slide. As Amanda pointed out, we are a statewide network. We are managed through the George Mason University under contract with Small Business Administration. There are actually SBDC offices around the country. There are 27 in Virginia. I'm in Hampton Roads, and we go all the way out to places I've never even seen before, out way far west in Virginia. We cover the entire state. We're located in a variety of different locales. A lot of our offices are associated with local colleges or universities. Our office in Hampton Roads is connected with primarily with the Hampton Roads Chamber of Commerce. We do have an office on the Eastern Shore of Virginia, all the way up to Williamsburg. So we try to cover the entire state. Our services are free, and we provide a variety of levels of expertise for different types of industries. And we have been doing this for 25, 30 years or more. So we feel like we have a pretty good feel for what works in Virginia and what doesn't. The next slide is more about our topic of today's discussion. I first want to thank everyone who's on the call that did receive a COVID EIDL loan. The SBA recently was forced to provide some statistics on approval rates, et cetera, for this program. And there were roughly 21 million loan requests made under the COVID EIDL program, and there was approximately 3.9 million approvals. That works out to an 18.5% approval rate. So if you, in fact, got a COVID EIDL loan, you are in a distinct minority. The SBA claims that that's pretty typical for emergency loan programs, but to me, that seems to be a very low statistic, but that's what they're telling people now. So how did we get here? I know a lot of us would like to have amnesia, but 2 years ago, the country and the world was shut down by the COVID pandemic. And that's about the time that I was brought on to help the small businesses throughout the state, was in conjunction with the COVID-related pandemic closures. Congress, in its infinite wisdom, responded by establishing a couple of support programs. And some of these are probably very familiar to you. Some of them might be nightmares to you, I'm not sure. The first one was the Paycheck Protection program, or PPP, that expired in mid 2021. That was an interesting program in that it was a loan that, if you followed all the rules and regulations, could be converted to a grant and be, in effect, free money. In addition to that, they expanded the disaster loan program, or the classic EIDL, if you will. The EIDL program and the disaster loan programs are direct loan programs. That is, you get the money directly from the SBA. They're the sole provider of the loan program. You don't go to a local lender for this. This program in various forms has been around for decades. The most common use of this is related to natural disasters like hurricanes, earthquakes, droughts. If a state is declared a disaster area, then the residents in that state could get direct loans from the SBA to rebuild their homes, their businesses, things like that. Well, they took that program and did some tweaking to it, some of it better than others, and came out with the quote COVID EIDL program. This program expired at the end of 2021. That is, that's when they stopped accepting new applications. And they also ran out of money earlier this month. We'll talk about that in briefly later on, the status of that, the expiration of that program. They also rolled out some targeted or special advance programs where you could get up to $10,000. And then the second generation was the targeted advance, and then they came out with the supplemental targeted advance. All those programs rode into the proverbial sunset at the end of last year. Then in addition to these programs, there were additional industry-specific programs, the Shuttered Venue Operators Grant, known as SVOG, and also the Restaurant Revitalization Fund, the RRF. These were both grant programs. SVOG is in its final stages of winding down. The RRF ran out of money within 45 days of opening last year and closed with a lot of controversy, unfortunately, and shut out a lot of potential borrowers due to some legal issues. As I said earlier, the COVID EIDL is a modification of the EIDL program that's been in various forms for decades. And one of the things you may have seen if you read closely your loan documents is that the loan documents they used were off the shelf. That is, they were very generic for all disaster loans and were not specific to the COVID EIDL program. And we're going to touch on those inconsistencies, if you will, in a couple of minutes. But first, the next slide, let's talk briefly about what is working capital. What in the heck is that? In my lending experience, a lot of borrowers would come in and say, I need this and this. And I say, you need working capital. And they look at me like, well, what are you talking about? Well, the SBA does not have a specific definition for working capital. Lenders like myself and other bankers use working capital described as what you need money for all the non-specific purposes. That is, general operating costs of keeping the business operating, making payroll, paying insurance and in taxes. It's kind of the catch-all phrase, if you will. So that's what this program was for. It wasn't to be used to buy buildings or vehicles or things like that. It was to provide ways to keep your business open and operating during and after the pandemic. Now, there are two types of working capital. There's short-term working capital. What that means, short-term in a bankerese, is a use that's less than 12 months in duration. That is, if you're buying inventory and you're selling it on credit terms to your customers and they pay within 60 to 90 days and you pay off the working capital facility that way, that's considered short-term. It's generally tied to what lenders call a line of credit. And then there's long-term working capital. And the COVID EIDL program is a long-term working capital program. That is, you borrow the money, you use it as prescribed by the program guidelines, and then you pay back what you used over a long time. Long-term in bankeries is more than a year. Most non-SBA backed working capital loans are 3 to 5 years, sometimes 7 years in duration. Under this program, you've got 30 years, which is in dog years is a really long time to pay back the loan. The COVID EIDL program is a long-term working capital loan. Now, back to what does working capital mean? On this slide, it shows some of the use of proceeds that the SBA said you could use this money for. And one of the biggest changes they made came in September, I think September 8th of 2021, when they came out and said, in addition to buying inventory, et cetera, making payroll, you can now use this to refinance non-SBA debt. That means if you had accumulated before or during the COVID crisis, some loans, either term loans or credit lines, and the repayment terms are really either high interest rate or a short repayment term that was really hurting your repayment ability, you could take some of your proceeds from the COVID loan and refinance those debts. This covers past and current obligations, and you could also use it for future needs. That is, you didn't need to have all this debt accumulated. You could keep the money and use it for ongoing expenses as they were incurred. And they also had this weird category known as extraordinary capital needs. And that's where you can really get into the weeds, if you will, with the SBA on what does that mean. I would say that would mean if you had to use some of the money to do improvements to your HVAC system to improve ventilation, if you had to buy plexiglass screens or buy PPE, things like that, you could say, well, gee, these weren't used in the normal course of business prior to COVID, but hey, I had to change my operating procedures because of COVID to get customers back in the door. So that's another category that they included. So the next slide goes into what you can't use the money for. With SBA, it's always kind of a crapshoot as to what you can use funding for. But here's some reasons or ways you could not use the COVID EIDL proceeds. Refinancing SBA debt. You can't take an SBA loan and refinance another SBA loan under most circumstances. That's just a guideline that they've had in place for a long time. Refinancing new debts. That is, if you go out and get a brand new loan and then you want to refinance it with this, they're going to say, well, no, you didn't have that debt when you got the COVID loan. Why are you refinancing it? Buying capital assets. This is where you get into long-term assets. That is, buildings, things like that, rolling stock. If you bought a giant printing press, for example, that's considered a capital asset. You're going to keep it for a long time. You're going to depreciate it over a long time in most cases. Expanding your facilities, building a building on a vacant property you may own. These are things you're not supposed to use this program for. Paying dividends or bonuses to the owners. Doesn't mean you can't pay bonuses to employees if you had historically done so, but you can't use it to line your own pockets. Another sticky area is disbursements to the owners. If you in the past had done some specific work to get paid, you could use this loan program for that. But to say, hey, I got a windfall of cash, I'm going to take a world cruise, that's going to be a real issue. Back into ownership questions, repayment of stockholder debts. There are a few exceptions, but in most cases, you would not be able to use this or should not use this loan program for that purpose. Repayment of direct federal debts other than IRS, you can pay back taxes, et cetera, things like that. but you can't use it for ongoing debts with the federal government. Things like that, repairing or replacing physical damage. There are other loan programs for that. They didn't want you to go in there and renovate your building because you was hit by a tornado. That's not what this program was all about. And if you have any doubts about how you should have used the money, talk to the SBA folks in the disaster assistance program to make sure that you're not tripping over a tripwire that can cause you problems later on. So the next slide goes into documentation requirements. You may recall or may not recall, because I know there was a lot of paperwork flowing back and forth when these loans were approved and funded. One of the documents you received was called a loan agreement and authorization, or in SBA speak, it's the LAA. It's like a commitment letter. And one thing that I found in a commitment letter, the LAA, is on page 4. And this goes back to the issue with using off-the-shelf documents, because this really pertains, or should have pertained, to other types of emergency funding from the SBA, but it's in the loan authorization for this program, which could mean the SBA could say, oh, 5 years from now or whenever, oh, by the way, you sign a document that says we can enforce the following. And the things that they said they can enforce per the loan agreement that you signed was the maintenance of proper books. And you can read it, it's in there, it's on page 4. Another one is they reserve the right to inspect and audit your books and records. And then they also say that if you don't provide certain documentation, or you have to provide it by a certain date, and they may require you to get a reviewed financial statement from your accountant. But in the guidelines for this particular program, they said that you have to retain all required documents for at least 3 years following the funding of the loan, which contradicts what the loan authorization says. I've asked the SBA for clarification on this. They have not provided it yet. Hopefully they will. Once they do, we will provide that information to members of the network, and you can check with your advisor to see what the SBA's final decision is. This again goes back to the type of documentation you should provide and retain is anything that's talked about record retention for this program, how you use the money, things like that, print it out and put it in a paper file form. And keep that for at least 3 years, because that's the window of time the SBA is saying is specific to this program for record retention. So in addition to copies of checks, invoices, bills of sales, payroll records, tax filings, etc., like 941s that you may have used the money for, make paper copies of all that and keep them in a box. I can't stress too much the use of printed documents, because if you put it on the internet, even on the cloud, 3 years from now, you may not be able to access it. So if you put it all in a box somewhere, and sometimes it could be a pretty big box, you've got hard copies that you can present to the SBA if and when they ask for it. So think about what's going to happen 3 years from now. A lot of us are going to want to have amnesia about the whole COVID situation, but the SBA may not. So make sure that you document everything, how you spend every dollar. And if you haven't done so already, go in and either open a separate checking account in the business name that matches the loan, or create an internal accounting system that matches every dollar in and every dollar out, because that's what the SBA could require you to provide to them if they do a random audit. They reserve the right, regardless of the size of the loan, to do a random audit. They can come out and touch you 3 years from now and say, remember that $20,000 EIDL loan you got? Well, we want to do a random audit. So keep that in mind and don't rely on your memory. I know from personal experience at my age, I don't remember much of anything from yesterday, much less what happened 2 or 3 years ago. So document everything you did. And it's not too late to go in and recreate or create for the first time how you spent the money, because you want to make sure that you're in compliance with the SBA. So that's just a little clue on documentation requirements. Now let's go to the next slide, because this is coming up. This question comes up a lot. If you, when you received an email referencing a loan increase, it also included information about monthly payments and the impact of deferment. That is, the SBA came out and said, when you got your initial loan, and also if and when you got an increase, you don't have to pay anything back for it. It was 18 months and then 24 months. And most recently it's 30 months. That sounds great. The loan's on deferment. That's the key word for that period of time. But keep in mind that the interest clock is ticking through that whole time. The longer the loan is on deferment, the more the interest is going to accrue. That is, it's going to keep adding up. And what the SBA is saying, that if you don't pay your interest during deferment, that amount is going to be added to the end of the loan. Now, this is another area where the SBA, I've asked for clarification and have not yet received it, is that SBA policy for other loan programs has historically stated that one of the advantages of SBA loans is you will not have a balloon payment at the end. The only exception to that I'm aware of is for the express loan program. But they're saying, the SBA is telling people that there will be a balloon payment for the unpaid accrued interest at the end of the loan. I've asked the SBA, well, how can this be? And they just right now have scratched their heads and say they don't know. Hopefully they will correct this. And what they will do, if they do correct it, is they will adjust your monthly payment to repay the unpaid interest over the 30-year term of the loan. Hopefully they'll do that, but I have not gotten any sort of feedback from the agency at this point in time that they will do that. So stay tuned for that as well. The SBA has come out and said, hey, borrowers, you may want to go ahead and throw some money at the accrued interest, so you will have a smaller balloon payment or won't have one at all. So confusion reigns supreme. Let's go to the next slide, because this talks about how to make a loan payment. Keep in mind, this is a loan. This is not a grant. It will not be converted to a grant. This is a loan that you will have to repay in 30 years or less. There's no prepayment penalty, so you can repay the loan in full or in part early without penalty. Also, depending on the size of the loan, I think if the cutoff point was over $25,000, they were going to take a lien interest in the assets of your business. And we're going to touch on that in another slide a few minutes from now. This means if you try to borrow money from another lender after you got this loan, the lender is going to do a UCC search, and guess what? They're going to find, or should find, that the SBA has filed a lien on the assets of your business, and your lender's not going to be happy. The SBA has stated that they will, in most cases, subordinate their lien interest. And that's going to be covered in that other slide. I got some updates yesterday that I included in that slide, but you can't just automatically assume it. You've got to ask the SBA in advance, will they subordinate, and if so, to whom? Now, first, to loan payments. There's two ways to make a loan payment. And the first one is located on the bottom of this slide. You can mail it, snail mail. Oh boy, Portland, Oregon. No idea why they chose Portland, except their SBA offices are all over the country to meet some sort of political mandate. You got to include a lot of information in with your payment to make sure that it gets credited properly. Now, the next slide goes into an alternate way that you can make payments. And this is the way that is the preferred way to go. You can create an account with pay.gov. This is a secure website that's used by a range of different federal agencies, including the SBA. And this is the way to electronically send money to the SBA for your loan payment. Make sure, though, that you've pulled up or looking at an account, a email account with the suffix gov. If you see .com or anything like that, then you're dealing with somebody other than the SBA. What you need to do is, once you go into the landing page, you can scroll down and you'll see, like, you can make payments to the Coast Guard if you're documenting a vessel, things like that. But then there's also on the landing page one for the SBA. You click on that site and you want to complete the form 1201, which is called borrower payment. And included on this slide is what you need to provide. And if you don't have it, I've included some phone numbers you can reach to get information such as your 10-digit loan number, which you have to have. And it's important to know too, that if you want to get balance information, due date, how much interest has accrued, anything like that, you don't go to pay.gov. You go to the Capital Access Financial System, or CAFS, or you can either call them, and the number's included here, or you can email them. I always prefer email because then you have a written record, and say, hey, give me this information. I want to know it so I can adjust my records accordingly. You only use pay.gov to make monthly recurring payments or to pay the balance in full. You don't, as I said before, you don't use it to find out when your due date is, things like that. It's the pay.gov system is pretty self-explanatory, and they've also created a payment guide and FAQs that you can go to on the SBA website, and it'll walk you through what you have to do, how you have to do it, the boxes you need to check in the form 1201, etc. So they've made it pretty easy for people to either make recurring payments or to pay the loan off, or to make unscheduled payments. That is, if you want to make a payment for a third of the balance, that's considered an unscheduled payment. The next slide goes on to how to make the payment. You've got to have an account set up, and the account needs to be in a business account in a name that matches the name on the loan. You will be setting up ACH payments or bank drafts, if you will. You can do it that way. If you don't have a business account, if you have a business PayPal account, you can do it that way, or you can use a debit card. You can't use credit cards to make payments, but you can use debit cards. But to reduce the amount of confusion, the SBA really strongly recommends that you have a business account name that matches the loan name. As I said earlier too, you don't use this form 1201 for any other special loan program payments, or you just use it to make payments on your COVID EIDL loan. You notice too that you want to make sure that you don't check inadvertently payment in full, or they will draft the full balance. You want to make sure if you're making a regular payment that you check the right box. And one thing also, when you fill out all the information, you'll get a review and submit button. Once you submit it, then you'll get a confirmation email from the SBA that says, yeah, your pay.gov is set up, and be prepared to start covering those payments every month. And the one thing too, the SBA has said that between now and when the first payment goes off of deferment, they're going to send more information. They haven't said what that information is going to be, when it's going to be sent out, but keep looking at your emails. And if you get anything that looks a little weird that's coming directly from the SBA, it might be related to this question. So the next slide goes into subordination. because if you've got a 30-year SBA loan, at some point in time, or even if it's shorter than that, if you pay it off sooner, you probably need to go to another lender and get a loan. And your local bank or whoever you're dealing with is going to do what's called a UCC search on your business assets. And the UCC search is where they go into the UCC's website. UCC stands for Uniform Commercial Code Search, excuse me. And they'll go through a third-party agency to do this. And guess what? The lien that the SBA filed 5 or 10 years ago is going to pop up on the list as having a prior lien, and your lender's not going to be happy. Some lenders, when they get that, are going to go, forget about it. We're not lending you another penny because you lied to us. Others are going to go, what are you, stupid? How did you forget about the SBA lien? So make sure when you talk to another lender, I mean, you can actually do your own UCC search, but when you talk to another lender, let them know you've got this SBA loan, and the SBA is going to need to subordinate their lien interest. Now, again, the SBA has repeatedly said, oh yeah, we'll take care of it, not a problem. But they're not going to do it overnight. So if you're in a situation where you know you're going to get another loan and they're going to want to lean in secured interest or lien on your business assets, don't wait till the last minute to start looking into this. The SBA has set up a procedure, like the SBA likes to do, that includes the completion by you of a couple of forms. The first one is the application for lead subordination. The one in effect now is dated March 2nd of 2021. They'll probably come out with updated versions. They always do. And then there's a third-party authorization form you have to sign, and it all has to be sent to, here's an office in Birmingham, Alabama. Don't know why it's there, but some politician got an office there. They're going to want to have that documentation filled out. You can either email it, again, that's to me the preferred way, or you can call them. But keep in mind, it could take at least, and I say really stress at least 5 days for them to respond. And depending on their volume, it could take considerably longer, or if they have any questions. They're not just going to automatically agree to subordinate. They're going to want to know why you need the subordination, who the lender is, things like that. So that's a reality check that you need to look at because you have this loan. Again, it affects pretty much every COVID EIDL loan because most were over $25,000. So I just wanted to provide that data to you. I just received it yesterday from the SBA. So hopefully that'll be helpful to you. So the next slide is, what do you do next? Well, here's some helpful hints, if you will. Do an audit on your loan. That is, put your eye shades on and say, okay, if I was a third party that walked in tomorrow and said, you got a COVID EIDL loan for $200,000 and you say you spent it all, prove to me what you spent it on. I want to see all your checks, everything. And you've got to match up how you spent the money with all your expenses, and then you've got to compare it to what the eligible expenses were. And so what I suggest you do is say, okay, I spent $100,000 on payroll. Sounds pretty clear, but make sure you've got documentation supporting that you spent $100,000 on payroll. And as I said earlier, if it's not too late, set up a separate business account, or if it is too late, set up an internal tracking system, a sub-account system that segregates when you got the loan proceeds, how much you got, and how you spend every dollar of it, because the SBA could ask for that. And I said earlier too, is make paper copies. Don't assume that you can go to the web or the cloud or anything 3, 4, or 5 years from now and download information. If it's not there, if it doesn't exist, then you're out of luck. That's why a paper file is very important. And also, if you've got anything that looks a little weird, like expenses that kind of in the gray area. We'll put in writing a statement in the file why you thought it was a legitimate use of proceeds. And if you can't justify the expense, the SBA may ask for you to repay those sums. They might say, okay, you got $200,000. You can only prove you spent $150,000 as per the guidelines. So we want our $50,000 back. Also, do this as soon as possible. I'm learning as my age advances that it's very easy to forget facts and figures and details years after the fact, particularly when all you're doing is putting out fires to keep your business open. So do this as soon as possible. As soon as you spent the money, or in some cases, even before you spend all of it, is go in and say, okay, how and why did I spend the money? Let me think back to my mindset at the time. Why did I spend $10,000 on paper bags or PPE? What did I spend it on? Where are all the invoices? And keep in mind too, that this loan is not a personal piggyback. This is a loan. This is a business loan. Don't go out and buy exotic pets, artwork, things like that for yourself using this loan program. It will not fly with the SBA. You can always hope that they don't look at your numbers, but you can't bet the ranch that they won't tap you on the shoulder one day and ask for clarification of how you spent the money. So that's that's pretty much the end of my presentation, but we did want to provide adequate time for questions. We received several in advance. We also got some today. So we'll open it up to questions. I think we're going to first read the questions that were received and discuss those, and then we'll go to the ones that were received today. Is that correct, Mandy?
That's correct. So I have a list of questions that were submitted when you all registered for the webinar. So I'm just going to start going down that. And then Amanda, you might be able to go back to a slide if I reference that. So the first one is, if I paid myself in advance a salary or wage that was shown on my 2021 tax returns as net income for about 6 to 9 months, then this money can be used for personal uses. Is that correct?
Again, it goes back to how do you justify using a business loan for personal expenses? I would caution you to, if at all possible, not use any of this money for personal use. The only exception would be if you had in the customary operation of your business prior to COVID, used business income for personal uses. But I think you're really skating on thin ice if you try to use any of these funds for personal uses. That's my opinion. You can talk to your accountant about it or some other advisor, but I would be really wary of doing that.
One of the things, and you tell me if I'm right or not, Mike, is that if people have used it for payroll, I've encouraged them to have that separate checking account and write themselves payroll like they would any other aspect. Is that maybe a way to do that so that you're showing it as a salary for services that you offer to the business?
Exactly. And make sure that if you do so, that the amounts you're paying yourself are similar in size to what you paid yourself before COVID, because you don't want to be accused of padding the book, so to speak, and writing yourself huge checks for income, personal income that you didn't write prior to COVID. Everybody knows, including the SBA, hopefully, that COVID screwed a lot of things up. Kind of an understatement, but they're going to be looking at how you spent money pre-COVID.
All right. These next questions, it's actually a group of 3, and they all are very similar. So I'm going to summarize them. Are these loans eligible for forgiveness? Is it possible that the idle loans will be forgiven? And are we required to pay back the idle loan?
The short answer to all those questions is this is a loan. It will require repayment. There's some buzz occasionally in Congress that COVID loans may be forgiven. I'm highly skeptical of that buzz. If and when that does occur, the SBA will certainly notify everybody, but don't count on it.
The next one was, it says my loan was forgiven, but it shows that I owe. How do I rectify?
I think you make sure you're talking about a COVID EIDL. COVID EIDL loans have not been forgiven. It sounds like you might be talking about a PPP. And that program is very different because it can be forgiven, but there's oftentimes a lag between when the lender forgives it, the SBA forgives it, and when it's actually shown as forgiven on the SBA system. But again, that's PPP and not EIDL.
The next question is, can you discuss the terms of loan stipulations for subordination, receipt of other funds, and the UCC filing and what it means? I know you went over this on slide 6. I'm not sure if you want to just retouch on that real quick.
Yeah, I think it's, here we go.
Right.
Again, I added this slide yesterday in anticipation of this question and also based upon updated information I got from the SBA yesterday afternoon. And follow the guidance on this slide, and it should address or resolve any issues you have with subordination. But again, the big, I guess the big tip I give on this is plan ahead. First, tell your lender that the SBA has filed a lien, so they won't freak out and cancel your loan. And secondly, provide enough time to give the documentation to the SBA so they will subordinate. It's not going to happen overnight. So don't put yourself in a box and end up at crosshairs with your lender.
The next question is, what if I have not touched my EIDL loan?
Okay, if you haven't touched it, first I would think that given the amount of uncertainty in the economy, it might make sense to hold on that money for at least for the rest of this year, possibly longer, because you never know when a financial working capital emergency may arise. But keep in mind that you will eventually pay the accrued interest on the amount that you've borrowed. But 3.75% interest fixed is a pretty good interest rate, particularly in a rising rate environment. So it really depends on your particular situation. But given the craziness in the economy right now, it might be wise to hold on to that money, because once you pay it back, it's gone. But that's a choice that you would have to make based upon your own particular situation.
Yeah, and I would agree with you on that. Definitely, Mike. It's case by case basis.
Yeah.
Are there limitations on what the funds can be used for? You went over this on slide 5. Maybe Amanda can back up to that one.
Yeah, but she can't find it.
Or maybe 4. I'm not sure.
You know, you'll get a copy. You will have access to the slide, so you can refer to it. But this slide, yeah, here we go. Okay.
Sorry, I
Back
told you
one slide. There we go. This kind of covers what the SBA calls working capital. Pretty common stuff. The only wrinkle in here that I can see is this debt refinancing, excluding SBA debt. And as I can't stress too much that when you use the money for any of these purposes, document. Don't expect 3 to 5 years from now you're going to remember why you spent X dollars on buying inventory. When it's just not going to be in most people's mindsets at that time. And yet the SBA is going to expect you to provide that documentation. So the same with any of these uses. Just make sure that you properly document and explain, why did I buy a bunch of extra inventory? Well, look at supply chain issues. That could be a very useful reason why you spent extra money on inventory, to kind of control your product cost. But you're not going to probably remember that 3 to 5 years from now. Why you paid certain account payables, all those things. And again, if you have an issue or a question, contact the SBA directly and get their guidance. I can't say for great certainty that they're going to know, because they're kind of grasping at straws in all of this, but always question and document why you use the money for whatever purpose.
All right, next one is kind of a compilation of questions. When's the date to start payments? When do we start paying on our loans? Because there are no invoices from the SBA as of yet.
Right, they will start sending it out, they say, before the 30-month deferment period ends. 30 months is from when the loan money was sent to you. You can also go to the email address on the slide I provided in the presentation. The CLS system can give you that information. But again, they claim they're going to, and hopefully they'll follow through on this, will send you a notice, hopefully more than 30 days in advance, saying, oh, by the way, your payments are going to start within 30 days. This is what it is. Here's how you make your payments, etc. And again, I hope they follow through with that, but keep in mind that the burden is ultimately on the borrower to make sure the loan payments are made.
So I'll add to that, that if you're in doubt that you can't find your information, that I would recommend you call the loan servicing center. Most of the loans for Virginia are in Birmingham, Alabama, which is also that contact information's on one of your slides, Mike.
Right.
And talk to them, find out how to get it. And you can always just start the process there. You may have to go through multiple people. However, I can tell you that you're the one that's going to have to do it. They will not talk to anyone else. They won't talk to us as your counselors. You have to be the one to make those calls. And so you can find out the repayment information, especially if you're interested in going ahead and paying some of that interest now.
Yep. So that Birmingham address is the same one that you would send any subordination request to.
Yes.
But it's a regional servicing center, and they're kind of soup to nuts organization. As Mandy pointed out, the key question is getting to the right person.
Right.
Which is true with any organization, but particularly the SBA right now. You've got to talk to somebody who knows what they're doing and can guide you through the process.
The next question is, can I just hold on to the funds for years as a financial backup while paying it off with the funds?
Yeah, I think we've already covered that or similar question, but yeah, I would, given the low interest rate and the fact that it's not a line of credit, which means if you pay it off in full, it's gone. Given what's all the unknowns in the economy right now, it's a cheap source of money. Park it in your account. Just keep it until you need it. If 3 to 4 years from now you don't need it, great. You can pay it back in full. You will have to pay the accrued interest, but trying to get alternate sources of funding right now could be a real challenge. So if once you have the money, it might be worth holding on to.
Mike, I'm going to point out and just re-asking that one of the things said, can you pay it with the funds? So can you use idle funds to pay the idle loan?
Not really, because you would be repaying an SBA loan with SBA funds. So, but I don't know how the SBA is going to monitor that. I think if you hold the money aside and return it and pay the accrued interest, then that would be okay. If you're going to make monthly payments with the loan in itself, you just document it. Again, I think it's going to be really hard for the SBA to challenge that you made monthly payments with loan proceeds, because it's going to depend a lot on how you document it.
I missed the deadline to download the idle documents. Is it too late? I'll go ahead and you included a phone number, one of the slides, being able to access. And do you have that one in front of you, Mike?
Yeah, the SBA closed the online portal. And if you try to access your loan documents online, you're going to get some sort of too bad, so sad email. But they have said that they have kept open a customer service phone number for that purpose. And here's the number. It's 833-853-5638. Talk to the person. They're supposed to understand what you're asking for, but they will be sending you the loan documents. However, it's, again, with a lot of SBA things, it's not going to happen overnight. You can expect 7 to 10 or more days between the time you make the request over the phone and when you actually get the documents. But they have retained a way to get the loan documents. And I strongly urge you to make sure you have the complete loan documents, copies of the signed documents. So if there's any question down the road, you've got in writing, just like you would with any loan, all the pertinent loan documents, and keep them.
Thank you. What would happen if I received the loan but had to close the business?
Well, it's still an obligation that the company owes. One thing I would encourage you to do, and I'm not an attorney, and I would first think you should talk to an attorney about this, but look at your loan documents. This is another reason why it's good to have them. Determine from the reading of loan documents if you personally guaranteed the credit. The SBA had some size limits on personal guarantees. But if you look at the documents and realize that you're not personally liable, then the assumption I'm making is that you close the business and there's no way to repay any of the COVID EIDL loan. If that's the case, then I would recommend that your attorney or whoever's handling your closing, and hopefully you have an attorney involved, would contact the SBA at one of the, at the address we've provided, the servicing center, and saying, hey, I've shut the doors, or my client shut the doors. They're not personally liable. They didn't get any money from the liquidation of the business assets. So too bad, so sad, and the SBA will write it off. The challenge becomes a couple of things. First, they could come back and say, okay, we show that we had a lien on the assets. What assets did you have when you liquidated? What happened to the proceeds of those assets? If there were any, we had a lien position, you didn't honor our lien, you're due to. And then they could possibly pierce the veil, if you will, of personal liability for this business debt. I don't know if they will or not, but in my experience as a lender, that could be a situation where they could. Or if you personally are obligated on this credit, they're going to tap you on the shoulder one day and say, hey, Mr. Smith, you owe us so many dollars for your closed business. And then you have to decide how you're going to handle it personally, if you're going to file personal bankruptcy or work a repayment plan with them. But again, these are questions you need to ask competent legal counsel.
So that was the EIDL related questions submitted ahead of time. I'm going to move on into the Q&A. And so combining this, so someone's looking at selling their business, what needs to be done to transfer the loan? And the second part is that should they notify the SBA before the sale of the business or after? Is after okay?
Second question first, notify them in advance. The SBA does permit the assumption of debts by new borrowers, new owners, but you need to get that in advance. That's again where you'd contact the Birmingham Servicing Center and say, here's the situation. I'm selling my business. What do I do? What do I need to do? And they'll take it from there. My guess is they're going to require the buyer to sign some sort of documentation that they are taking over the debt. I don't know that for a fact, but that's what they've done with other types of loans, because all SBA loans are assumable under certain conditions. So that's what I would recommend you do. Talk to the servicing center early in the process, or have, again, you're going to need to do it because they won't talk to anybody else, and say, this is what I'm planning to do. What do I do relative to the SBA?
Next question. I received my loan, but my name and zip code are incorrect. How do I get this fixed?
Contact the servicing center. They're going to be busy, aren't they?
They are. We're going to give them some business.
Yeah.
I will just make sure that you do have your information, your loan number not your idle account number, but your loan number that would have been on documentations or others when you're calling them. So we
Yeah,
run
it's a
into that.
10-digit number. And the confusion, I think, for a lot of people is when you applied, you got an application number. And most of them I thought saw started with a 30 or 33, something like that. Your loan number is going to be different. And if you try to use your application number, you're going to end up throwing your phone against the wall in frustration.
Yes. Right. The next question is essentially asking what happens in the event of the borrower's death, especially if they are a sole proprietor and were to die before the loan is paid. Because they're a sole proprietor, of course, the business dissolves. Does that mean the loan dissolves as well?
The short answer is I would think so, but that's again a question you need to get legal counsel to advise you on. But by the nature of a sole proprietorship, once the proprietor dies, then the company ceases to exist. So I would think that the obligation would be extinguished. But again, that's a legal question, and I'm not an attorney. And I'm not an attorney spokesperson either. So
Right. The next question is, I received $6,000. How do I know if it's an EIDL or a PPP? And I did go ahead and read that live because I think it's important for everyone to have that information.
well, it's going to depend on where you got the money from. If you got the money from a third party, either an online lender or a bank or whomever, that's a PPP. If you got the money directly from the SBA and it's a loan and not one of the advanced programs, then it's an EIDL loan. If you've got your loan number, that can be a clue too, but that would be again why you might want to contact the servicing center, give them your loan number and say, is this a PP, is this an EIDL? And if they say no, then that might be another clue. But if it is an EIDL loan, the SBA will be contacting you. They're telling people they will be contacting you prior to the end of the deferment period and letting you know that payments are going to start.
The next question is, I was in the middle of asking for additional funds because they said money was still available. I had to upload another document. Is it still viable or is the money gone?
If I answered that question a week ago, I'd say, so sad, too bad, so sad, you're out of luck. But about a week ago, one of the senior people with the SBA by the name of Patrick Kelly did a congressional hearing on this very subject. And he said in writing that if your increase was approved, and that's the key, if your increase was approved, then he's saying you will get your extra money. But other people have already received emails from the SBA to the contrary, saying you didn't get the money because the funding wasn't obligated to you. I don't know the answer. I've asked the question of that to the SBA and they just shrug their shoulders. They don't know what's going to happen. So the only solution I can say is keep watching your email inbox and see if you get any notification from the SBA in the next couple of weeks saying, oh, we found you the money. You were approved. Here's your additional money. But if they're waiting for documentation, my guess is they had not approved your increase. But if you've got an email saying that it was approved, then it's a different question.
Thank you. Will making loan payments on time affect my credit score?
It should help. The SBA in the past, though, has not been generally reporting payment histories to credit bureaus. So I don't know if it will with this program or not, but you might have to separately show or get a payment history from the SBA to show to a lender. But I would be surprised if they were actually sending these records to credit agencies.
I haven't seen proof of that with anyone, but like you said, you can download your own information through that other system, not pay.gov, but the other one.
The CLS, yeah.
Yeah, the CLS. And so you could show that with a creditor on your own. What happens if I start making interest payments and it happens that the loan is forgiven at a later date? I'm going to combine that with another question, Mike, for time. Is there a possibility the idle loan will be forgiven in the future? And I think we kind of answered that, but I'll let you.
Yeah,
real quick.
I would say right now, I wouldn't bet the ranch that it's going to these loans will be forgiven. That would take a huge commitment from Congress, and I don't see them opening their purse strings to do so. But if they did down the road, then they would have to rebate to people. Depending on how the approval or the funding was done, they might say, anybody that's paid, too bad, you've paid, and that's, they'll probably say as of a certain date or date specific, or they might go back and say, all your money's refunded. Who knows?
And I would be with Mike that I don't see that happening, but anything can happen. What are the consequences if I can't pay the loan back because of low income and I just don't have the money to pay it?
Well, again, it goes back to the earlier question. It depends on whether or not you're personally obligated, and also what collateral, if any, is on the loan. I would talk to the servicing center. They're probably going to say, okay, talk to our workout department or something like that. The SBA is ultimately in the money business. That is, they want to get their money back, and they'll probably work out some kind of arrangement where you make graduated payments or something. They haven't been specific in that, but in my experience with them, that's been their approach in the past. If you have a problem, talk to them. Don't surprise them. The SBA doesn't like surprises. Lenders in general don't. Talk to them and say, here's my situation. Help me if you can, and leave it up to them to decide what they can do.
I think probably communication is the key on that aspect of it.
Early communication. Don't wait till you're walking to the courthouse to file bankruptcy to call the SBA and tell them.
All right, that's it for our questions. I've got someone I'm responding to privately, but Amanda, I'm going to turn it back over to you to close us out.
All right, great. Thank you both so much. Thank you, Mike. That was a great presentation. I just want to let everybody know you'll all receive an email with a link to this recording and to the slides that we shared today. If you'd like to sign up for upcoming webinars or access recorded webinars, please visit virginiasbdc.org/training. Be sure to check out the next be sure to check out our webinars at the site there. You can also access on our website the COVID Business Recovery Center, which we developed to help owners not only continue business operations, but to thrive and recover. All of our resources are designed to be used in collaboration with your local SBDC advisors. You can sign up for a free and confidential session by emailing help@virginiasbdc.org or via our website. Thank you all so much for your questions. Thank you for attending today, and we hope to see you all in our next session. Oops.